Welcome to the Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast, brought to you by Golden Age Premier. High-quality, vintage-style products at an affordable price point. To find out more, go to goldenagepremier.com. This episode is also brought to you by Fuse Audio Labs. Uncompromising emulations of classic and rare studio processors in revolutionary plug-in form. For more info, go to fuseaudiolabs.de. And now your host, EYAL.
Hello, everybody. This episode is brought to you by Ultimate Guitar Production, the most detailed, in-depth course ever created about guitars. The course is taught by Andrew Wade, who you may know from one of his 3 appearances on Nail the Mix, or work with bands like A Day to Remember, The Ghost Inside, Wage War, or Neck Deep, and it covers everything, and I mean everything. It's over 100 videos that cover every single step of the guitar production process. Setting up the guitar, choosing the right amp, cabs, mics, the right way to track guitars, editing, reamping, mixing, and more. He puts it all together by dialing tones for indie pop, rock pop, punk, and metal. And there's actually way more than what I just told you, but I'm out of time. If you want to see all of it and get a sneak preview of the content, go to ultimateguitarproduction.com and prepare to have your mind blown. Hello, everyone. EYAL Levy here. Before we get into the episode, I just want to tell you that by popular demand, we are now on Spotify. So, if you use Spotify for podcasts, just go search Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast and follow it and enjoy. Also, even if you use Spotify, we would really appreciate it if you went to iTunes and left us a 5-star rating and a review. That really helps us out a lot. And lastly, if you want to follow me on Instagram, just go to @EYALLevyURM Audio. And if you don't know how to spell my name, it's EYALLEVIURM Audio. I post lots of pictures of dogs, but in addition to that, every single Nail the Mix trip where we're in amazing studios all over the world, I try to document that pretty well. So come say hello. Today's episode, I've got Mr. JF Dagenais, who is the guitar player from the death metal band Kataklysm, as well as a longtime producer. He's actually a Juno Award-winning producer, and he's recorded bands like Despised Icon, Malevolent Creation, Misery, and Dexter Axis, and all the Kataklysm records. And he's been doing this for close to 30 years now. He gets some sick productions. He's just one of those guys that understands the extreme genre so well, and I've wanted to talk to him for years. So what I think is especially relevant about this episode to all of you, even if you're not into death metal, is that you're going to hear from a guy who has managed to carve out a living in a very trying environment, not only in one field or in one profession, being a person in a band. And it's already impressive enough that they have gotten as big as they've gotten in the genre they have, but also as a producer. And the idea of being able to balance 2 careers, I think, is especially relevant for people trying to make a living in music now, because you do need those multiple streams of income. And on top of that, being able to balance that with having a life is just, it's tough stuff. But really, it's so important, because if all you do is work, you're going to you're going to redline yourself into the ground. And what's it all for anyways, if all you do is work? But then on the other hand, you have to work your ass off in order to get just one of those careers off the ground. So to have 2 is super impressive. And I think that you guys will get a lot out of it. In addition, one of the best ways to increase word of mouth about you as a producer is by having a band that people like. And we're going to find more about that in this episode. So without further ado, We're getting started. JF Dagenais, welcome to the URM podcast. How's it going?
Very good, very good.
Well,
it's nice to be on here. I'm very happy to be here with you guys.
Well, I'm happy to have you on here. I know that I told you in email that I've been a fan of your work for the longest time. I think back when I worked with Misery Index, it scared the shit out of me. I just thought that your guitar tone with them was so fucking evil. It's just so awesome. I didn't feel like I could compare to it, and I lost a lot of sleep over it. So I'm talking like in 2004
well,
or something.
Thanks for the compliment.
Yeah, it's awesome to talk to you, and I'm glad we're doing this. I'm glad my car wasn't towed. For anyone listening, I'm late right now because my car was getting towed, but we're all good. So you live in Dallas, I saw?
Yes. I moved there and like 10 years ago already. Time flies.
Yeah, it does.
And I just classic story. I met my wife here and decided to just go for it. And but I love it down here. It's great. Always sunny. It's quite cheap to live compared to Canada, and I really enjoy being here and doing studio work as well down here.
It's pretty different from Canada. And also, did you come from Montreal?
Yes, I'm from Montreal.
Okay, so Montreal, from what I understand from the few times I've been there and just from everyone I know from there, that's kind of like a mecca in North America for metal, and that's quite a great scene to walk away from.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, especially if you're into an insider in this business, I think Montreal is really good. Like, there's always bands or musicians doing stuff, and there's so many metal fans out there that it's. I was sad for that part of like walking away from that, but Dallas is kind of nice too. It has a lot of cool underground bars, and there's quite a lot of pretty heavy bands down here as well.
Like Devourment.
Yes.
Are they still together?
I mean, I just work actually with Kevin. He plays in another band called Kill Everything, and I mixed a single for those guys not long ago.
Awesome.
And so I think Devourment's still going, but they're also starting a bunch of different side projects.
Makes sense. I can see that happening. So I mean, Dallas definitely has, and Texas in general, has more metal activity than a lot of other places in the U.S., but I guess you had to feel pretty strongly in order. Both, I mean, obviously you felt very, very strongly about your wife, but you had to feel pretty strongly that you could just pick up where you left off career-wise too, like that that you weren't fucking yourself over, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think I always liked Texas and the South in general. Whenever we did tours with Kataklysm in the past, like it was one of the places I was attracted to in the States. I thought like the vibe here, and it's pretty laid back, but it's also like people are very metal and the rock is very strong here, and I really I like the move I did. Like 10 years has passed, and I'm can't say like I would want to go back to Montreal. I really like living here, and people are very welcoming. I made a lot of friends, and I'm very happy about how things worked out for me. And you never know when you jump into something like this. It could be a horrible experience, but for me it wasn't. It was
a risk.
Yeah, totally.
Well, the thing is, you were already quite established 10 years ago, but still, that's quite a big risk because it's not like you were moving to LA or something.
I mean, nowadays, say for me, I got to keep a lot of my clients from the past because I still do a lot of mixing and mastering for those guys. They'll find some other way to record. The difference also nowadays between like compared to back 10 years ago is it's very easy for musicians to record themselves. Like a lot of bands would actually have their own little studio set up, and they get really good quality recording on their own. And so I get to do a lot more like mixing and mastering and stuff like that. And like I do a lot of Skype and FaceTime to give advice whenever they do stuff or they'll ask me questions. And so I got to keep a lot of the clients I used to work for from Montreal this way. 10 years ago, it wasn't that easy to actually have like the guy from the band themselves like record their own stuff. I feel like the technology has just evolved so much, and it's so much better nowadays. Like the it's insane what you can do is just a computer and a good sound card versus 10 years ago.
Yeah, and 10 years ago, it was kind of scary too, because I remember that's when bands started, only coming in for drums and a mix or something, record guitars on their own, doing everything in Guitar Pro. Like all that stuff was starting to really pick up about 10 years ago, but the technology was still kind of shitty, and it was in its infancy. So you were seeing a lot of bands. I don't know if you experienced this, but I definitely experienced this, that a lot of bands would come in and not be able to play anything because they had just discovered Guitar Pro and would program everything Guitar Pro and then not know how to play a fucking thing. That was happening. And then also they were recording themselves for the first time, but on much lower quality stuff than you have now. And so you'd be getting garbage tracks that were played horribly. And I was very worried about how things were going to work out for just the genre in general and just music and the future of it, because I couldn't see how it could continue like that. But it seems like the technology got better and people learned how to play again, and we're in a good spot. But were you at all concerned back then?
I mean, like if you go back 10 years, I was really concerned, because I always wanted to take projects from the beginning and be there along every step. You know what I mean? I wanted to make sure that everybody did their part right and kind of oversee everything. But nowadays, I feel way more confident that when I get something recorded from a local band, let's say, and they do it on their own, and in most cases it's very well done, and there's very little to be fixed on those tracks. But like 10-15 years ago, I would never have done it. Like I really made it a point to be there and produce everything from A to Z.
So I was just wondering how you adjusted. I mean, the thing is that we have had to make this adjustment whether we liked it or not, because this is the way that things are evolving, and you can't fight evolution, right? So this is the way things are going, and this is the way they were going. I know a lot of people who had lots of problems with it, but and fought it every step of the way. But at some point, people either had to, stick to their guns and somehow make it work, like someone like Kurt Ballou, but I would say that he's the exception. Most people had to figure out how they fit in with this new method. How did you come to terms with it?
I mean, the positive I'd say is that I prefer mixing and mastering. Like in the grand scheme of things, that's really my passion. But I think like it was a step. At some point I was like, okay, I gotta let this go, because I'm not gonna work anymore if I start like wanting to push my ideas. I still try to push my ideas to the band, but I feel like the bigger budgets and time that people would put into like a production, they're definitely not the same. And this is the way things have gone. I come to terms with it personally. And also, like I get to do a lot more mixing, which is what I really, really like. And the other part I really like is also pre-production, because I love the writing and arranging part of things. So that I always try to bring in my influence, or I always try to help the bands I'm working with do better. I feel like it's something that really gets me off to actually help a younger band that are starting doing music, and if I can help them like write stronger songs or better arrangements, like that's something that I really like. It makes me feel proud at the end of the result of seeing everything recorded and done, and that I can help somebody, like the evolution of a new musician from the experience I got from all the years of being doing this. It makes me feel really good about myself.
You know, it's interesting you say that. I never imagined, you know, maybe 10 years ago or more, when I was just a musician in my band, and when I was, I guess, at the earlier point in production, I never imagined that I'd actually, like, I don't want this to sound bad, but being just a musician is very self-centered, and it has to be, because, you know, you're creating your own art through your physical body. So you have to, your mind has to be in the right place, and then your physical technique has to be totally honed. And so you have to be focusing on yourself a lot. And it's why a lot of musicians are narcissistic and, have personality problems and all that. But it goes with the territory. And I never imagined that I would kind of find my life's passion in something that was designed to help other people like that, because I was coming from the musician standpoint of helping myself get better. And but now that like URM has been going for years, and we're seeing all these positive things, like helping so many people, either at the lower end of it, just get better at recording their own home material, to the higher end of it, helping people quit their jobs to be able to record full time and to start working under really big producers. Like, I love that. It's far more inspiring to me than even my own music was. So I kind of understand exactly what you're saying about helping a young band become a better version of themselves. It's really cool.
It's things that I wish I had when I grew up. Like when we first started Kataklysm, everything was really DIY. We recorded everything ourselves, and we learned like about the business and how to do our own things ourselves. We were basically a bunch of kids in high school that got together and started a band, and we didn't know anything about it. We just got lucky to get a record deal very early on. And I wish we had people that would have jumped in and say, hey, like, you're doing this wrong, or you're doing this right, go this way, or like some sort of a guide. And I like, it makes me feel good now to give back and be that person for younger bands all these years later. And we've learned a lot through, like, Kataklysm's been around for almost 27 years now.
That's insane.
So it's crazy. In my mind, it went so fast, but at the same time, so many things has happened, and I've learned so much in this business doing this, and it feels really good to give back, and that's what makes me passionate still about doing this right now. Because I mean, like, I really love playing in a band. I really love writing music still. To me, like, the songwriting, that's my favorite part out of everything. Writing music and then putting it out there, like all this stuff, the promotion and the touring and all that. I like it, but it's not my favorite part is really writing and arranging and stuff, and then helping younger musicians. And also, like, I grew so much. You grow as a musician. You go through all this these years of trying to do things better, but then you learn, like, years down the line, that sometimes simplicity and just like the realness and the natural state of things, that's what really works, and that's what really better than trying to impress. Like, I feel like when we started, you want to impress and be like really crazy technically and also brutally, like for us, we were one of these guys that wanted to be the most brutal band in the world, and like having like 1 million riffs per songs and all these crazy tempo changes and all that. And at the end of the day, I'm happy to have learned that, like, just simplicity and real is the answer.
Man, I think simplicity is way harder. Like, I mean, to pick, when you have a million options, to pick the one right one, I think is way harder than to have 1,000 little ones that go together that are okay. But to find that one idea or two ideas that are just incredible, that, and how to phrase them properly and present them properly, I mean, that is really hard stuff. I mean, it's funny to me when people talk badly about pop music because they don't understand how much skill is involved. But the ability to take a simple idea that resonates with a lot of people is incredibly difficult. And I see that across the board in all different forms of art. The need to be super complicated and impress other people at first, and then with maturity, the simplicity comes in. And you know, now the mix, we watch a lot of people mix. You know, we've done about 50 of them now. And, you know, so I've seen a lot of great mixers mix. And I can tell you that 95% or more of the time, they're doing simple stuff. I mean, every once in a while, you'll have someone on who has a super complicated, intricate chain, like Taylor Larson. You know, he's on his own level, but he doesn't always do that. I think that these people are capable of complexity when they need complexity to solve a problem, but they have the maturity to use the simple solution when that's all you need. And I think that it does take maturity, but that's, in my opinion, that's the path in any form of art, is to figure out the simplest solution possible somehow.
Yes, definitely. I agree with that 250%.
So, you know, I wanted to talk a bit about your move a little more, because a lot of people who listen to this live, you know, for instance, in the middle of nowhere, and they don't have any clients yet. And they ask about moving to places like LA or Nashville or whatever, you know, the standard places, or, you know, they just come from a place where there's very few bands. And I've always told people that, you know, wherever you are, you need to just become the best wherever you are to begin with. But then at a certain point, you kind of do need to be where the work is until you can establish yourself. And then once you're established, you can go anywhere you want because people will come to you. And I kind of feel like you're a perfect example of that. You started in Montreal, which is, you know, a capital for metal in North America. And then after being established, you could move to a place like Dallas. I mean, Dallas is in the middle of nowhere, but it's definitely not like Montreal as far as the scene goes. But I feel like you could have gone anywhere. You could have gone to South America. You could have gone to Russia. It doesn't matter where you went. I think you could have taken your career with you. Do you have any thoughts on that for people that are considering moving or not?
I have one thing that I have for myself is that I have two careers, which first one is being a guitar player in Kataklysm. And we got lucky enough that with just the band, I could make a living on my own without the studio stuff. Studio stuff is my passion.
That's really impressive, by the way, for a death metal band.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
If you ask me how we did it, I absolutely have no idea. It was just, we just bulldozed our way through everything, and somehow it worked. And somehow we have now our own, like our own family of fans that are supporting us, and it's really awesome, and I'm very thankful also in the same way, at the same time, because I see many people's career that it worked for a few years and then it went down, or like it's really rock and roll, this business, and I'm happy that we're like been a steady band throughout these years. It's unbelievable. Like I remember conversations we had like 10 years ago and saying like, I don't know if we're still going to be doing this in 5 years, but here we are still doing it, and we're still having fun. So nowadays, I think it's mostly the key thing we're talking about is like, as long as we have fun doing it, we're going to keep on doing it. But I feel very lucky for that. And then parallel to that, I did my producing career, which I kind of started like on my own, like using 4-tracks cassette recorders back in the day at my mom's house, because that was the only way I knew I could make my own demos and start recording and presenting my own music and putting the first few Kataklysm things together. That's the only way I knew how to do it, and I've kind of learned on my own how the production side of things worked. And since all of us in Kataklysm had a really DIY approach to things, we kind of went doing things our own way, or on our own. It helped both sides of the fence. Really helped, like the band, like the band took off, but also like I started getting clients because I was the guy in Kataklysm, and people heard my work, and they thought I was doing quality stuff for an affordable price. So I always kept good clients, and I never really had to push myself too much, which is also something that I'm lucky for. I was always able to find work and keep working throughout the years on a very like word of mouth kind of thing.
Honestly, man, I think word of mouth is the way that producers get work. I think that advertising and marketing doesn't work very well for producers. And for people listening who are going to be like, wait a second, CLA does all this marketing or whatever, or URM does all this marketing. And what my answer to that is that, well, CLA is selling products. He was a huge mixer long before he had anything to do with any products. And that marketing is for his products. He'd be getting great mixes regardless of that stuff. And URM, you see us advertising all the time, but we're not producers. I mean, we're producers, but that's a whole different thing. URM's a business that sells products. But I think that for an actual producer, engineer, mixer, word of mouth is the number one best way to do it. And that's why I always tell people that if they have their own music, that one of the best ways to get their name out there as a producer, engineer, is through their own music. Make it sound as good as you can and try to get out there with that, because people will hear that and will want to work with you if they like what you do for your own music. And that's one of the easiest things you can do if you don't have great bands to work with. I mean, make your own band great and make it sound as good as you can. Exactly.
And if you do quality work, there's always people that will look for that. And also, like, for me, the way it works most of the times is I'll work an album for a band, and this band has other musician friends that will get to hear it, and they'll call me. They'll be like, "Hey, you did this record for these guys, and we want to work with you." And it's kind of like a domino effect, and that's how it worked for me.
I got to say though, and I'm curious to your opinion. One of the things that I've always admired about Kataklysm is that you guys, well, I'm most familiar with you and Maurizio, but like what has struck me is that in addition to just being a sick band, you guys are very entrepreneurial. Like, you have your parallel career. One feeds the other, which is really, really smart. And then Maurizio, he's got the management thing going on. He's, as long as I've known about him, because I've never met him, but we know all the same people. As long as I've known about him, I've always heard about his business ventures and how good he is and how killer of a situation he sets up for Kataklysm, because he's so smart with business, and and that extends to his non-Kataklysm businesses as well. But you guys are a very entrepreneurial band, and this is why I think that one of the things that bands need to do in the modern day, maybe in the older music industry wasn't as important, but in the modern music industry, I think bands need to think like entrepreneurs, and they need to think about how many different streams of income and networking they can create for themselves, because say that you're not bringing in income through certain parts of your network directly, but like you said, a bunch of musicians who are friends of yours who hear your work in the band, and then because of that, they know that you're a producer. They hear something you did and either want to work with you or will recommend other people to work with you because they had experience with you on the road and know you're a cool guy and could do the job. Like all those things work together to where the band alone doesn't need to carry the entire weight. You have a whole, I guess, array of weapons out there that you're using to further the cause, as opposed to just the band. When people do that, I think that's when it gets really, really hard.
Yeah, I think if you want to live from the music industry, you gotta do multiple things. I think it's something that you learn also what you like because I know a few musicians. They're like I have a few friends that are like, man, I'm not good at anything else. Like I can play my guitar, but I don't know what else to do. But there's always something you can do as a part of this business, and like say,
or learn something.
Yeah, exactly. Like say in our bass player in Kataklysm, Stefan, a lot of people don't know that, but he's a certified accountant, so that helps a lot as well in different ways. Like
okay, there you go.
Yeah, he's balancing all the books and everything for whenever we go on the road.
So you guys have a entrepreneur manager, you have a producer, and an accountant in the band. See, it all makes sense now.
Yep, and then like say in Mauricio's case, he kind of same as me. He learned how to do things through like doing it for us because nobody else would. So, and he took everything he learned from the experience in Kataklysm and started helping other bands going through like what we've been through, and like he knows all the pitfalls and all the where and when to push and when to pull back and things like that, and you can get very valuable advice from somebody like him in the business. And then like for me, I think it's a way of life. Like you're going DIY with everything in your life, and you just go for things that makes you happy and go for things that gets your heart pumping, and just go for it and learn as much as you can, and try to live out your passion, because most of us musicians thinks 9 to 5 sucks, and that's not what we wanted to do in our lives. There is other ways. You just have to work hard and learn, and just not be afraid to take the steps to go forward and move on.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing about the time period we live in is that you can learn anything you want just about on your own. I mean, obviously, you're not going to become a surgeon through learning on the internet, but there's a lot of things that you can do. And so if you have a basic talent in something in addition to your music, you can take the time to really hone it and learn more about it. For instance, when I knew that I wanted to start my own company in 2013 and 14, I knew I wanted to do this, but I had never started a company before. So it's, you don't just do that. You don't just quit your current career and start another career in something you have zero experience doing whatsoever. So I bought as many marketing courses and business courses as I could, and just basically put myself through school on my own and learned how to do it. And I advise that everyone figure out what it is that they can do in addition to just music. Like say you're a producer and you want your clients to have a great experience with you, so that they recommend you to other people and want to come back. Well, one of the things that you can do in addition to doing a great job with the music is think about, just as a thought exercise, think about everything that you know how to do that could possibly benefit them in some sort of way. Like, do you know how to edit video? Do you know nutrition? Do you know accounting? Like, there's so many different things that if you actually think about it, you could help other people with. And I doubt it. You know, when people say that they just know how to do one thing, I never believe them. It's impossible that they just know how to do one thing. And I think that oftentimes they just don't realize how many things they know how to do, or how many things they could just spend a month brushing up on that they could do well enough to help other people with.
No, yeah, totally. I think we all have like strengths, and we need to discover what they are and just push them. And like you said, it's so easy to just pull up information online, and you can teach yourself everything you need to know, and just move forward and do the best you can do with all that information. And there are so many helpful things you can do. Like say, there's a lot of musicians that I know also would work as like crew guys between tours on with other bands. That's also another possibility to make extra income between the tours, like be a good drum tech, a good guitar tech, like sound engineer on the road, tour manager, lighting engineer, all these careers that are a possibility for musicians. Because when you're a musician, you know what the band you're working for really needs and what they want from technicians. So it's easy for you to put yourself in their shoes and give the services they need. So it's a big plus.
Do you find that the musicians you work with trust you more because they know that you've been through the challenges of being in a band?
Yeah, definitely. I think, say, like if you're a musician, you know that, like, you know all the ins and outs, and you know like what you want to accomplish as in your career. And I think like it makes you so much more knowledgeable of what the person you're sitting with in your studio wants. And then it's easier also, like the whole because I feel like if you're a producer or an engineer or some, when you're working in that field, you got to be a little bit of a psychologist as well. And I think it makes you a lot more knowledgeable about the psychology of everything.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big plus, and it makes people feel more comfortable to work with you and that sort of thing.
So let's talk a little bit about your earlier career, because I'm interested in some of the finer details of how you used Kataklysm to fuel the production, and the production to fuel Kataklysm. So you said that you were self-taught, and that you did it in order to be able to record your own music. But at any point, did you get an internship, or did you work in a studio? Like, I mean, back in the 90s, I know that there was barely any information out there for people, especially people who wanted to learn how to record metal. So did you learn everything on your own, or did you have any experience in a professional studio that you could then use?
The very first time I went to a studio was a Montreal band that wanted a demo, and they asked me for it. They knew I was doing all the home recording stuff, and they wanted something a little more professional. So I said, okay, let's go find and rent a studio, and we'll record with proper equipment. So I opened up the yellow pages, found a small recording studio that was affordable, and actually went there, rented the place, and produced everything. But there was so much I didn't know. I didn't know what kind of mics to use for what.
I was going to say, that sounds kind of intimidating.
Like the first time I put the tape on the actual tape machine, like the 2-inch track, I wasn't sure which direction to go with the tape. I followed the little pattern that was drawn on the machine to put the tape on there, and I don't know how, but somehow it turned out pretty good.
Did you have an engineer helping?
There was a guy from the studio, and he was assisting me, and like it was kind of like showing me like don't do this, do that, but at the same time he was just kind of sitting there to make sure that I don't burn the place down. But like it was a good experience, a good first step for me to get into the more professional world. But then I kept getting bands to call me and do demos for them, and eventually I got bigger stuff coming my way. So I rented like one of the bigger studio in Montreal, which was Victor Studio, and I brought this band there and recorded on like the big high-end gear. And when I went there the first time, I really got along with the owner, and he offered me a job as an assistant for his studio. And so I picked that job up. I jumped on it right away, and then I got really lucky to get to learn to the next level, like how to caliber a tape machine, how to plug in everything properly, how a real like recording studio work. And I worked there for almost like 5-6 years as an assistant, and also I was working my own projects that I would bring in, and he would give me a special rate so I could work my bands there. And same with Kataklysm, we did many Kataklysm records at that place, and eventually got to a point where I learned the ins and outs of the business, and I was starting to feel like, wait a minute, like I'm bringing all these bands, but I am actually making the studio a lot of money, which I could myself pocket if I had my own place. So then that got me thinking about like starting my own business and my own studio. And back in those years, it was a little bit more complicated because we obviously didn't have all the technologies from today, so you had to...
It was expensive, very expensive back then.
Yeah. You had to buy all this expensive gear, but one thing that led to another, and then Kataklysm, we were getting really good recording budgets for earlier albums. So what we did is like we put all that money into buying our own gear instead of spending it on a studio.
Very smart.
So we started doing that, plus with the money I was making from producing, I put all that together and bought extra gear with that as well, and borrowed some money at the bank. So I managed to open up my own place and then started doing our own stuff. And the beauty of it was that like every time we would do more Kataklysm records, then more money would come in, and we'd do it again and just spend it on more equipment and just keep building the thing and making it bigger and more professional.
That's a great situation.
So that's how I did it myself. Like, and I think again, like, don't be afraid to jump feet, like both feet, like right into these things, because I think that's how you get business going.
Absolutely. So this is interesting to me, the dynamics of being a member of the band that's also producing. I always found it very, very difficult to do. But so back in those days, did the other band members treat you as a producer or as a member with extra powers, or how did that work?
Well, it worked really well because they actually they really believed I knew what I was doing, and they gave me like the keys of the castle, basically, like just to do things how I wanted to. And I did that for years, and it went well most of the career. And eventually, only later we started getting into fights about like, hey, I want things to sound a certain way, or they didn't like how I was doing things, and like putting more and more pressure as the band was getting bigger. So eventually I started using other producers to mix, because just to avoid all the headaches and the fighting down the line. But that happened like only recently. The last few albums we started using like big name mixers to do our stuff, and for me it's like a way to get rid of that headache, and at the same time
it's a big relief.
Yeah, it's a big relief. So now I become just like a band member again. And also I produce only like the songs, the arrangements, and the recording, and piecing things together. We get it all prepped up like super professionally, and then we just send it out. Then I don't have to worry too much about fighting my guys.
Hey everybody, if you're enjoying this podcast, then you should know that it's brought to you by URM Academy. URM Academy's mission is to create the next generation of audio professionals by giving them the inspiration and information to hone their craft and build a career doing what they love. You've probably heard me talk about Nail the Mix before, and if you're a member, you already know how amazing it is. At the beginning of the month, Nail the Mix members get the raw multi-tracks to a new song by artists like Lamb of God, Opeth, Meshuggah, Bring Me the Horizon, Gojira, Asking Alexandria, Machine Head, and Papa Roach, among many, many others. Then at the end of the month, the producer who mixed it comes on and does a live streaming walkthrough of exactly how they mixed the song of the album and takes your questions live on the air. You'll also get access to MixLab, our collection of dozens of bite-sized mixing tutorials that cover all the basics, and Portfolio Builder, which is a library of pro-quality multi-tracks cleared for use in your portfolio, so your career will never again be held back by the quality of your source material. And for those who really, really want to step up their game, we have another membership tier called URM Enhanced, which includes everything I already told you about and access to our massive library of fast tracks, which are deep, super detailed courses on intermediate and advanced topics like gain staging, mastering, low-end, and so forth. It's over 50 hours of content, and man, let me tell you, this stuff is just insanely detailed. Enhanced members also get access to one-on-one office hours, sessions with us, and Mix Rescue, which is where we open up one of your mixes on a live video stream, fix it up, and talk you through exactly what we're doing at every step. If any of that sounds interesting to you, if you're ready to level up your mixing skills and your audio career, head over to urm.academy/enhanced to find out more. It's interesting when in my band, I mixed one record and then I never wanted to do it again. It was such a painful experience. But so then I always tried to get people way better than me. And it always worked great. And it's very satisfying to hear something you produced mixed by someone incredible. It's very satisfying, but it also made life a lot easier. So I totally understand. And you worked with great people.
And the other thing is that I love as an engineer is that working with these big time mixers, you keep learning as well. Because I learned a little bit from the different guys we got to work with, and the people like Andy Sneap and Zeus and Jay Rustin on the last one, and you kind of get.
Jay Rustin did the last one?
Yeah, he mixed the last Kataklysm.
That's awesome. He's great.
Yeah, I think he's a great producer, and he's Canadian as well, so we have that little kinship. So that's cool that those guys, you learn a little bit of something from everybody, and you put that into your own experience bag, and then you just apply it to what you do, and it just makes you a better engineer down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the primary things in your reputation or qualities that people talk about is your ability to get such punishing guitar tones. Can you talk a little bit about tone chasing and where you started versus where you are now, specifically with guitars?
With guitars, I think I always wanted to have the biggest monster wall of sound I could find. And I started with Boss heavy metal pedals back in the day with a very small Randall amp, and I tried to cue that thing, and I experimented with so many amps and cabs and tried so many different things to get to what I wanted, and I finally built myself a setup that I really like, and I still use it to this day. It's many bands in the metal genres use the same setup. It's the 5150 combo with the Mesa Boogie cab and Max and overdrive. That's what I got my sound from back in those days. But what I want to say about that is the way you cue and place your things. I really believe it starts from the way you strum and pick your guitars, and it's from the player itself.
Totally agree.
Because you can have the perfect setup, or the setup that's perfect for me. For as an example, I had other bands coming in the studio that were like, man, dude, I love your guitar sound, and I was like, here, like plug it to my setup, and they would they would start playing, and it sounded like crap, and it's just not that they were not a good musician, it's just don't pick the right way for a certain sound. So you kind of have to cater to the musician, the way they play and the way they pick the strings, and I think you gotta find the perfect setup for the person, and that's the harder part.
This is also why I tell people that, for instance, I know that a lot of people like to buy Kemper profiles from other producers, and I think the Kemper is great, but I think that the trick is that what you use the profiles you made then and there with the guitar player. That's when it's really, really great. When you start getting other profiles, maybe they can work, but they generally don't work that well. And they certainly don't work even close to as well as one that you made right then and there for that album with that guitar player, with that rig. That's when it works fantastically well. And I think that that's just the case with gear and music gear and guitar tone, drum tone too. Like the person who is playing the instrument, it all starts and ends with them.
Exactly. I do the same thing. I own a Kemper myself that I use when we play live. My profile that I'm using is a profile I created from my rig at home. And like you said, it doesn't work for everybody. It's like when I work with a guitar player in the studio, I really work hard to find like what works for him. Then I'll make a profile of that, and then some, like a lot of albums I would use a Kemper to record, but I would make the guy his own profile. I think if you buy profiles from big producers, or even myself, I got lucky because I traded a lot of profiles with a lot of these big guys, so I got a lot of cool stuff in my machine, but I never end up using it because it's not right for the person that records. So I'm a firm believer of like building something for specifically for the player.
I know for a fact that I would get these profiles and I'd hear it on the record that the person mixed and be like, that is the sickest tone I've ever heard. And then you get the profile and it's like, well, it's okay, but that's not the same thing.
Another thing is like sometimes people like expect a profile that's really like almost like cooked already and mixed,
yep.
And you get a profile that's like really raw, and that's how a real amplifier sounds like. And then you still have to process the sound to make it good in the mix and to make it solid, to make it sit in the mix. So that's another thing also that like a lot of players expect when they buy a profile. Oh, it's gonna sound like the record, but it took a lot of processing to get to that part, you know.
You know, it's funny. Like 5 years ago, I sold a few. Like I did for like 6 months. I sold profiles from other people. Then I decided to stop. But one of the profiles that we sold was John Brown from Monuments. He is one of the best rhythm players around, and his tone is just fucking enormous. And those older Monuments records were all done with like a pod. Like he just knew how to make it sound incredible. Nobody believed. No, it was Pod Farm. Nobody believed it. Or maybe it was a Pod HD. Either way, it's 5 years ago. It was one of those. But he made it sound incredible. And when we sold the profiles, if you play through them, they sound like garbage. And I know that they're not. I know that they're the actual things because he played them in front of me. So I know that those are the actual profiles. But then I would sit down to play, and it would just sound like low gain garbage. And I mean, he has a massively heavy tone. But the thing is, the guy hits the guitar harder than anyone I've ever seen in my life. And I mean, he he can barely ever use any DI boxes because he clips everything because he hits so hard. And so that's the missing key. And so we would sell these and people would be like, that's not the tone from the album. I want my money back. It's like, no, that is the tone from the album, but I can't sell you John Brown's wrist.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the missing piece.
Yeah, I mean, it's a quest, and I think for everybody that's looking for the ultimate sound, I mean, what Kemper and Axifix and all these companies did, I think, is it made it easier for people to try different profiles and ads from home and download all these things, and it could be easier to find what's right for you that way. You get to explore.
I agree.
Which back in the day you had to actually find the real physical thing and just try them out and mic it and just spend hours to try the perfect mic position and
yeah,
EQ
and if you
stuff.
bought the wrong amp, you were stuck with it.
Exactly. So now it made things much easier, but it's still the same problem. To find what's right for you, and it takes a while. I think you gotta just keep searching and trying, and I keep trying to perfect my things. And also the one thing that was cool is to because we used these different mixers on the last few albums, I got to see a different take on what I do from like big time guys. So it's helped me like try to look for different things, or sometimes they would point out like you have a certain fizzle or something is wrong in the low end or the low mid or things like that I keep working on and incorporate into how I built my tone, and it's a mix of all these things that makes things better. And I feel like I'm closer than ever to the perfect guitar sound for myself, but I'm never 100% satisfied. I just keep searching and try to push it to another level always.
I've always described it like you're on a highway at night with the lights on in the desert. So so there's no lights around you, and all you can see is what's right in front of you. And the further you go, all you see is what's right in front of you, and it's just that way forever.
Yep.
I think that the better your tone gets, the more you're going to realize that it could get better. It never ends.
Yeah, it never ends, but it is okay. It's the beauty of doing what we do. If everything was perfect and we had like that one knob that would make everything great, then it would be boring to be an engineer, I think.
No, and I also think that mental thing of always wanting it to be better, or always thinking it could be better. I mean, that's what makes people get better. It's funny because I've had a lot of people over the years say, shouldn't you be satisfied? You should be satisfied. Like, just be satisfied with what you've got. Or things like a lot of people would be happy with what you did here. Like, you should be happy too. And it's like, no. The reason I was able to do this was because I was, at one point earlier in time, I was unhappy with where I was, whether it was a tone or my situation financially, or my career, whatever, my down picking, like any of that stuff. There was a point where I was unhappy, and then decided to make it better, and that is why now someone else gets to say, just be satisfied. But the thing is that they're not understanding is that state of mind of not being satisfied is what keeps things improving. And I think that the moment that you stop thinking that way is when things start to stagnate. It's the same reason that I know that Jeff Loomis in his 40s is still taking guitar lessons. And if anyone doesn't really need guitar lessons, it's Jeff Loomis. But that's exactly it, is a guy like that is that good because he always sees how it could be better and is always searching for it.
It goes for everything, as well as if you put that idea in a band kind of mind frame. There's a lot of bands that we saw along our long career that they fell down because I think they got to a point where they were actually satisfied and they stopped trying harder, and then you start making stagnant or bad records, and then like your career goes down. If you keep having that fire of wanting to make things better, you actually pushing yourself and you make better things, and just you keep going. It works as well that way.
Absolutely. Man, I remember when my band was unsigned, So this is from like 2003, 2004. We had a lineup, and I was very unhappy with the lineup. And one day I fired just about everybody. And in Atlanta at that time, it was very hard to find musicians. Very hard. It's not like it is now, where every drummer you meet can play double bass and fast and all that. Like, there was a time period where drummers could not play to the click, and finding a metal drummer who could play extreme metal was very rare. Like, it's a very different time period. But I went ahead and I fired these people because I didn't think they were good enough. And lots of people were like, you don't appreciate what you had. You don't, you know, lots of other people in town would be more than happy with this. Like, you're just being an asshole. And it's like, well, by firing them, that's what allowed me to find Kevin Talley, for instance.
Awesome.
And the lineup that we got, which is how we got signed, was in part because the lineup was so sick. And that would have not happened if I had just been happy with what I had. And so, I mean, I'm pretty passionate about this topic, mainly because all my life I've been hearing that I should just be content or whatever from people. And I don't agree. I don't agree at all. But so about your guitar parts, everything guitar-wise in Kataklysm, and also in what you record, but specifically in Kataklysm, it just sounds so tight and together. It doesn't sound crazy layered, but it sounds huge. But it isn't thin. It doesn't disappear. It's just right. And I'm just wondering how you go about approaching riff tracking.
I'm very methodical with it. I like to have an idea of the big picture before I start going into like the real tracking of the guitars. So of course we make a lot of pre-production and like figure out the songwriting first. Once we have the song and know exactly what pieces of the puzzle is gonna go where, then I sit down and actually learn, like I relearn everything in a sense, because like whenever I write music, I just go with my own feeling. A lot of times, like sitting in front of Pro Tools in my studio, and I just record riffs that I just feel, and that's the first thing I do when I start writing music. And on the last record, we did something special. We actually were all the four of us in the same room and wrote a lot of songs that way. We haven't done that in years, so that was also a different experience as far as songwriting goes. And I thought it was really nice because we could feed off each other really easily and put the songs together in a very organic way. And I think that made this last album special in a way. But then, like when I first started tracking and recording those songs, I knew exactly what's gonna go where. So now I could concentrate on actual getting a really good performance. And I just start with the riff one and play it until I'm happy, and have my left guitar track. Then I go to the right guitar track and do the same thing again on top of the first one. And I really try to get a natural vibe to it, even though I want to play it to the most perfect in the most perfect way possible. But it's, I think where I'm happy, it's the best of both worlds, because you want to keep a little bit of that organic feel of playing and not be too perfect, but you don't want to be off the click and off the grid as well. So it's kind of like find a happy middle between everything. And then once I'm happy with that, then I keep that part, move on to the next part, and it's very A, B, C, D, E way of doing things, but I move along like the songs this way. But for me, it's like I want to feel good when I hear the track. It's very important, and I think a part of getting that big sound is like also it's a feeling thing for me. It's when I feel like it's monstrous, then it must sound monstrous.
How do you define tight enough versus, you know, like it's, I think that maybe it's just, you know it when you hear it, but are there any specifics of what you mean by organic but still tight enough?
So an example is like, say, a lot of things that whenever I record tracks, on a few of our albums, I recorded the guitar actually first, and then we did the drums after. And then my drummer would pinpoint things like, hey, you're like on these riffs, like the heavier riffs, it's almost like I'm lagging a little bit on the click, and I realized like I'm doing it like naturally to make things sound heavier. So he's following those things and try to like to have a really heavy breakdown, and it's not perfectly on time. It's kind of like delayed almost a little bit.
So like behind the beat.
Yeah, behind the beat, and it's just my way of making things sound heavier. But it's something I always did naturally without really knowing technically what was going on. I just thought like that's my way of playing. But like sometimes you just go with your feeling, you follow your feeling, and you can also have sometimes like a visual guide where you look at the track and see where the like you're picking falls versus the grid, and see if it's way off, then it's too much, it's garbage. But if it kind of works within the grid visually, even though it's not perfect, but it feels good, feels right to you, and sounds good, that's when I know like I have a good take.
And so it sounds to me like the part that is variable is where it falls in time. So certain riff will fall behind the beat to make it sound heavier. However, even if it's off from the click, it's still on with itself.
Yeah,
right? So like
exactly.
the two guitars are tight as shit to each other, but they both come in a little bit behind the beat. So it's like a musical decision.
Yeah, because they're tight because that's how you play them. So it's easy to like double that track like by playing along with it, if that's the way you feel the riff, you know. And
Yeah.
And I feel it's better to leave it like that and make it sound huge than like starting to try to place every single pick on the perfect time, like on the grid, and be like, oh man, I'm way off. Like, and some engineers would start chopping and piecing things. I don't think that's the right way to go. It might sound perfect at the end, but you're missing a little bit of the point of like playing things naturally.
So where does bass fit in for you? Because, you know, bass in extreme metal is one of those things where it kind of, lots of people see it as an afterthought in a way, but it kind of is the hidden weapon, in my opinion, of every mix. Like, you have to get it right. And it's actually really hard to get right. It's totally not an afterthought, but I'm just wondering where does it fit in for you?
For me, the bass it's like the punch in the middle of the whole thing, and I still like, I'm a guitar player, so I always put my guitar first, kind of, so to speak. So I when I build my sound, it's like I'll build the wall of guitar first, and then fit the bass underneath it somewhere somehow. But the bass is nonetheless, like you said, it's very important, and it's very hard to get. I think it's, as a mixer, it's the thing that took me the most time to figure out how to get it right, because you need the bass in the mix to play its role, but at the same time in metal you want that guitar to be as wide as you can get it. So I found ways to make it work, and for me, I'll always try to fit the bass to make sure it has that very low sub frequencies. I actually split my bass track into I make duplicates, and I'll duplicate it like 2-3 times, and then split the frequency range of each track to focus on where I want to fit it. So there's one that's going to be like the extreme low sub, one is going to be like more in the mid range, and then the other track is going to be like the real high stuff. And so I do like the bass to sound a little bit like a piano, where you hit like the higher frequencies pretty hard, so it cuts through the mix and you can hear it a little bit through the wall of guitar, but then you have that low end that's making all the basically the punch of the record. So sometimes I'll mix it and you'll hear it, but you're like, man, I wish wish the bass was a little louder or whatnot. But then if you mute it, like the whole punch of the records disappear, and I think that's when you know where you got it right is when it's doing its job in the mix, in the puzzle.
Yeah, I think that one of the reasons that people think of it as an afterthought is because it's not immediately obvious what it's doing, but it's, like you said, it's immediately obvious when you remove it. So it's more of a utility, to the mix, but it's not jumping out like a guitar solo.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of mixers that are like that would push the bass first because either they're a bass player or they want like the instrument to really stand out. And I think really great things have been done as well. In that case, it's just for me, it's my way of working. I always work the other way around. I always push the guitar first, and the bass is like the glue somewhat in the middle, and that punch in the low end and the balls. But I feel that that's my way of making the puzzle work. But it's something that it's a very important instrument in the mix for sure.
I think that tracking guitars before bass is a very wise thing to do in extreme metal. The only problem I've ever found is that sometimes, I don't know, it's like sometimes when the bass isn't there, you can't totally hear that you're not totally in tune. It's weird. Like the tuning, I feel like is a lot more of an issue. So one thing I started doing to compensate is to program a synth bass for just to have while tracking guitars. So that way there's a perfect pitch reference always. Like you will always know beyond a shadow of a doubt that if you're off or not, and then just replay the bass after. But that helped me tremendously. But I feel like extreme metal is kind of defined by the guitars, and they kind of set the tone in a way for the whole thing. So it totally makes sense to me to go first with those.
Yeah, and also like another thing that people ask me is like, how did you get like the guitars to sound a certain way? It's just, there's no magic to it. You just have to do it and be patient, and like I do make a lot of mistakes when I track, and I'm very I think I'm like my own worst critic as well, because like whenever I track somebody else, I'm very Nazi on them, and I try to make sure that they do it right. And but when I do it, it's myself sitting in the booth and I'm recording, I'm so bad on myself. It takes me forever to get just one song done, and I have the patience to do it. I think the patience is the key to get perfect guitars, because you want to make sure that there's no fret buzz, fret noise. The tuning has to be 100% right, and all these things. And the guitars, having a good guitar is like in tune, that's been tuned by a professional, sometimes like it's half the battle as well.
Quite the battle, too. So do you get your guitars always set up by a pro guitar tech before tracking?
Yeah, I got the chance to have a buddy of mine that's really good with that stuff, so he does it for me. I think it helps tremendously, like the outcome of the guitars tracks, because you want that pitch to be perfect, and you don't want any weird like fret guitar strings, like kind of noise in there. So the purest possible way you can make that happen is like having a good instrument. And I'm lucky to have a guy that does it for me, but I'm also, with the years you learn how to do it yourself, but I trust him so much more, because he's very talented for that stuff. So I think also being a good producer is finding all the right talents for certain parts of the project, and not be afraid to delegate certain parts to other people to get it done right. Because I know a lot of people are like, man, I want it all done by myself, and it's all like you said earlier, the narcissistic thing where it's like me, and I think you gotta at some point be able to delegate and know when who's good at what, and like be able to oversee the big picture of the project and make everything come together at the end.
It's interesting. The producer, like by Hollywood standards, the movie producer is not the director. He's not the actor. I mean, sometimes maybe if it's a Tom Cruise movie or whatever. But the producer is the guy that sets the budget, who finds everybody, and keeps the project on track and does all the big picture stuff. And I think that in music, some of the greatest producers of all time, like Rick Rubin, kind of have that role where they find the best people for everything, and they kind of have they're like the mastermind of the whole project. And I think that even if you're an engineer also, and you do a lot of the dirty work, and that's okay, I still think that as a producer, you need to. A big part of the job is also having that mastermind mentality, and you got to get the ego out of the way and get a good team for a record. I think it's also for the sake of the record. You want your attention to be on what's really, really important. Like, are the songs great? Are these great performances? Are the tones great? Like, the shit that really matters. And everything that you do takes away a little bit of your energy and a little bit of your focus. And I don't understand why a producer needs to be worried about setting up the guitars when they can get a professional who is way better than them at it, who does that for a living. That's their thing. There are some people who they love guitars for some reason. They love the physical thing. Like, they it's just what they do. Why not get someone like that to fix the guitars so that you as a producer can worry about producing the record? It just makes so much more sense to me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's all these little factors that you can get like a very professional job on all these things. It makes like the actual work so much more like your focus is on the right things at the end of the day.
So what stuff do you delegate?
All these things. Like, I mean, it could go also for like, say, make an executive decision of like I know how much I love mixing, and I think I do a quality work at it. But sometimes I'm like listening to like, say, a song or an album that I produced, and I'm like, man, it would sound so much better if that guy did it. Or like, sometimes I have someone in mind for the album, and I'm like, let's just go for it. Like, let's get it done by that guy, and I think the music would benefit from it, And I think that's something people have a hard time doing as a producer, because they want the job, and they want to earn the money, or they want to make sure like they want to do everything on their own. But I think making decisions like that, it makes a better record at the end of the day, and the artist that works with you will come back, and the album has a much better chance of like going somewhere as well when it's released.
You got to play the long game with this stuff, and what I mean by that is that you need to make decisions that in the long run are going to bring the most benefit. And a lot of people don't think long term, they think now. And so now I want that budget for the mix. Now I want that credit now, because they're thinking, well, if the money's nice and I need that credit so I can get to the next level. But by giving that up when it's more appropriate to have somebody else, like you said, you give the record a much greater chance of succeeding. You leave the musicians with a much better feeling about the whole thing. And if it truly is the right decision to get whoever you had in mind, but, by helping the record be that much better, if you truly are not the person who should be mixing it, by just thinking of the big picture and making decisions in line with the big picture, that will end up getting you more credits and more money in the long run anyways. It really turns bands off when somebody hoards everything and won't let other people work on it when it could be better that way. I know this from experience, because my band experienced that with somebody we hired once. Mm-hmm. And it was horrible. The person, I'm not going to name names, but the person when I hired him to mix, and I wanted to have somebody else master it. I had someone in mind. He really wanted to master it too, but I didn't want that. But I gave him the shot of mastering it just to see, given the benefit of the doubt. But from the outset of the project, it wasn't like we hired him to master and then changed our mind or something, which would be okay too. People change their minds. But from the moment we hired him, it was known that I wanted this other person to master it, and he was not okay with it at all. And so what he did was, when he mastered it, he destroyed the unmastered mixes so that we'd be stuck with with the mastered mixes, and it's so fucked.
I think that kind of thing just leaves a bad taste in the mouth of everybody. Like, you don't, like, you're not gonna go back to that guy. You're not gonna tell your friends, hey, this guy was great to work with. Like, you just, when you do good work, I think that your reputation precedes you, and it goes fast. The word out there that you're doing a good job about something. And when you do a bad thing like that, then it goes the same way. It's like so fast. Like, it's gonna, the music world is very big, but yet very small. Everybody like knows each other, and like word travel fast, especially these days with the communication system that we have in place, and it's just like not bad. It's bad business.
Yeah, and it spreads. And if you give up the mix or the master or whatever, you're totally cool about it, and make it easy, nobody's gonna think badly of you. And if it comes out great, you're still the producer.
Yeah, exactly. That's what a good producer does, is just making sure the album is as best as it can be. I mean, and hiring the right people for each part of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about a couple more elements of this, because I really think that this is the hardest style of music to mix well. So I'm wondering where you see the extreme metal kick drum in all this, and how you approach it, because it's something that people routinely fuck up, and it's something that's very, very particular to the style, and when it's done just right, it sounds deadly, and when it's done wrong, it sounds like a typewriter floating in space, separate from the mix.
I think for me, it's I go like great lengths to try to make it sound as natural as possible. And whenever we record our albums, like say for Kataklysm, that's always a thing where we want it to sound as natural as possible, but yet still be like that thing where it's like super present, and make sure you want to hear every hit, and every hit has to sound big. So like, we're trying to compromise between both these things, and we really actually record. It starts from a real bass drums, and we always have like the real thing somewhere in the back, and then we start like layering samples and use a lot of multi-sampling to make sure like different sounds come back. A lot of like the last few albums, we actually used our own kick samples that we recorded ourselves, and we made a bank, and we used that bank over the real bass drums, and we just spent hours to try to get that right. And also the velocity is a big thing, where you can't have everything at 10, like 110 all the time. You want it like, you want whenever it's certain hits, you want it like not as loud in the mix, and then when it goes slower, you want it to sound natural and louder. So we spend a great deal of time to just take the pen and go over the tracks and making sure it's the right level for every part, and all these things at the end, like when done right, then you have a big sounding kick drum, still a little bit like over the top, but yet natural sounding to your ears. It's like, it's very ear pleasing in the grand scheme of things, and it takes a while, a lot of work in the background to get this done right, but that's something important in the metal genre for sure.
How do you dial the high end so that it so it has just that right amount of click but doesn't sound annoying?
Yeah, I mean, depending on how your drum sample sounds originally, I try to get like the clicky part of the kick coming from the actual like real bass drums that we recorded. So that right there sounds already much softer to the ears and more ear pleasing. And then I have a little bit of that tick from the sampler as well in there, but it's usually around like the 4 or 5K for me frequency to get that right click of the beater hitting the skin, and then I'll add a little bit of the higher frequency spectrum, like I said on the original real kick, to get that more natural vibe. And like it's easy to put too much when you don't know what you're doing, so you just want to add like it's like little hints here and there of these things.
All right, so let's move on to another topic, something I really wanted to ask you about. With having two parallel careers, and I would say even a third, because the band is one career, but you also have to be good enough at guitar in order to be in the band. So, I feel like being in a band and playing your instrument are two different things. Like the practice that you do on the instrument just to keep up. But so between being a guitar player, being a guitar player in Kataklysm, and being a full-time producer and married with a family, how do you stay sane, and how do you balance it to where everything is getting what it needs?
Yeah, you gotta make room for all these things, like especially the practice thing, because there was a point where I was so busy with the studio that I would barely practice my guitar, and then I would jump like on a flight to go on a tour and start the first date, and I was like, oh man, I wish I'd practiced before.
That sounds horrible.
Yeah. So
that's like a nightmare.
Exactly. So you have to keep playing, like, and I think I'm a person that likes to keep busy. There are some people that like try to live their life a little bit more laid back, and for me it's important I keep busy, otherwise I go nuts. So I fit it in my schedule. I practice my guitar. I still keep on working the tones and these things, and for my own personal research pleasure, and so I do that on one end, and then you're balancing your producer mixing career in there, and then I have a daughter as well. She's 4 years old, so that takes a lot of my time now. But the cool thing is I'm doing the studio at home. It's my own place. We built it in the garage, so it's really easy for me. If I need to tend to my daughter or something's happening in the house, I just like stop and do whatever needs to be done and come back, and that's a cool thing, being able to make my own schedule. It's very helping things a lot.
Yeah, I can imagine. Do you have bands come to your house at all, I guess, to record?
Yes, I still do. Not as much as I used to, because lately it seems like I'm getting more mixing job offers and mastering than anything else. But I still do once in a while, and I enjoy it. And I try to keep the hours limited when I do so, just because I don't want to have like someone playing drums at the 3 a.m. in the morning, and my wife sleeping on the other side of the house with the kid. It's just not happening anymore. I used to back in the day, but now it's like I try to have certain hours, and especially for drums and vocals, because like you don't want to disturb the whole house or even the neighbors at a certain point. Like my thing is pretty well insulated, but you still hear it from the street, So I try to have like good normal working days when I do those recordings.
And I also think that drummers and vocalists do better on a normal schedule. I mean, I know that people like to push themselves, but in my experience, there's always a point where, yeah, a drummer could go 14 hours, but generally after 6, they're just not as good.
No, that's for sure. It's the human body eventually starts getting tired, and it's better to rest and take more time to do things than be patient than trying to rush things. And that's also the beauty of owning your own studio, is you can make sure everyone has enough time to do what they need to do, versus like back in the day renting an expensive place where you had the constraint of budget. And when you do things at home, it's so much easier to balance everything and make sure the performance is getting captured the right way.
How do you balance that then? Oh, which I totally agree with you, by the way. That's one of the things I loved about having a home studio is that you can take the time needed. But how do you balance that with not spending too much time? Because I feel like that becomes the danger also is when you decide that you're going to, you have your own facility and you're going to take as long as it needs to get right. It can also turn into a huge time suck. And also, if they feel like they have unlimited time, that also can be, there's a negative side to that too.
Yeah, true. But the way I work things usually is like I'll say if I work on a specific projects and I'll think about enough the amount of time it's gonna take, and I look at my schedule, see the amount of time that I have available for that particular project, and what I'll do is I'll block, like say if I'm doing a record from A to Z, I'll block that month and a half, and that's the only thing I'm going to be doing for that time frame. But then also the band is aware that that's the only time I have for them, because after that, either I'm going to get on a tour or I'm going to have something else booked. So I'm trying to make it sure that they understand that we have to fit it within a certain time frame, but at the same time I leave myself enough room to make mistakes or to take days off or to making it right,
Yeah, absolutely. So it just sounds like balance and choosing your battles is
exactly, and not pick too much work, because that's another mistake I've seen people do.
I've done that,
and I was guilty of it myself. Is just you just go day in day out doing sessions and you just overbook yourself because you want the work and you want to make the money, and it's totally understandable while you can, because I tend to notice, for me, it's always the same thing. As I get one big thing going, and then there's 10 other things at the same time that everybody wants the same time frame, and you're and you just choose your battles and try to make the best of it. But I think your work's gonna suffer if you don't plan things right and you take too much on your shoulders.
I totally agree. So, pick the right ones, make them as good as they possibly can be, rather than do everything not as well.
Exactly. Totally agree with that.
It's hard though, I think, especially for people who are first starting to make a living at this, when they first start experiencing some success, and they go from not having that many bookings to a lot of bookings. They were just used to not having anything, so immediately their first reaction is say yes to everything possible.
Yeah, because you think that it's gonna stop, or you're afraid that it's gonna stop, and you just want to keep book everything you can now and just do it. But if you do quality work and you take your time, people are not gonna stop calling you. It's just you just keep working, It becomes a job and a normal routine, and I think the quality of your work must be the number one priority on your list, not how much work you're getting,
Yeah, actually, the way to get people to stop calling and coming back is by taking on too much and pissing people off.
Yeah, exactly.
So you actually by taking on too much work, you actually are a lot more likely to make your fears come true, I think.
And also the other thing, like you mentioned age earlier, I'm also in my 40s, so for me it's easier to make these decisions where I don't have the energy I used to have when I was 20 to take on many projects. So now I try to make sure I have the energy and focus to do the things I need to do and do it right, But I think it comes also with maturity of doing it a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't, and I don't want to, but there was a time period where, 36 hours, 40 hours would do it if I needed to. Mm-hmm. It would be fine. Fuck that now.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, not going to happen. But I'm okay with that too. I don't miss it at all. I actually wonder if if that was a good thing, because I know a lot of people who, in their earlier years would do crazy hours, and then they stop because they don't want to die or something, or lose their minds. But I am so much more productive now, because it feels to me like there's a certain point where you can keep going, but your brain is just not going to be as in it. And why not just rest?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's incredible what an 8 hour sleep can do for you. Just go sleep and come back refreshed, and the next day, and it's like you see your vision of things. It's so much different when you're resting.
Yeah, and also, when you start to get tired, you can take 3 hours to do something that when you're well rested you could do in 10 minutes, literally.
Yeah, that too, for sure.
So, well, anyways, man, I think this is a good place to stop it. And
All right.
So I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's great to finally get to speak to you, and just thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun. I enjoyed it.
My pleasure.
This episode of the Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast is brought to you by Golden Age Premier. High-quality, vintage-style products at an affordable price point. To find out more, go to goldenagepremier.com. This episode is also brought to you by Fuse Audio Labs. Uncompromising emulations of classic and rare studio processors in revolutionary plug-in form. For more info, go to fuseaudiolabs.de. To ask us questions, make suggestions, and interact, visit urm.academy/podcast and subscribe today.